Introduce our speaker, Rabbi Michael Melchior. The title for today's presentation is The Religious Peace Track as a Game Changer in the Middle East. And indeed, Rabbi Melchior has been one of those game changers, as we'll hear. He is the descendant of 7 generations of Danish rabbis. He was born in Copenhagen, Denmark, ordained as an Orthodox rabbi. He immigrated to Israel, made Aliyah in 1986. He serves presently, while being in Israel, as the Chief Rabbi of Norway, and also as the rabbi of a vibrant Orthodox community in Jerusalem, in addition to being the head of the rabbinical court in all of the Scandinavian countries. In 1999, Rabbi Melchior was elected to the Knesset here in Israel, and he served for 10 years in roles including Minister for Social Affairs and World Jewry, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Deputy Minister of Education and Culture. In addition, he was founding chairman of Birthright Israel, where I'll just mention that I remember voting for the party that Rabbi Melchior was part of. So I get a little credit for him being in the Knesset. Rabbi Melchior is the founder and president of Mosaica, the Center for Religious Conflict Transformation in the Middle East. In addition to that, he also founded Yachad Council, that promotes open dialogue between different strands of Israeli society while tackling religious and political extremism. He also established Meitarim, a network of over 142 inclusive schools here in Israel that educate children from all Jewish sectors and communities in Israel. And also he founded the Citizens Accord Forum, which promotes the building of bridges of coexistence and justice between Israeli Jews and Israeli Arabs. Rabbi Melchior is an internationally renowned Jewish leader, thinker, and activist, and a leading advocate for social justice in Israel, interfaith dialogue, and a voice for peaceful coexistence. And in addition to all that, I was informed just a few minutes ago that today is Rabbi Melchior's birthday. I hope that's true. So Mazal Tov, and thank you for being with us tonight. So Rabbi Melchior, please unmute yourself. And the screen and the floor and the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Rav Hanan. I could find no more pleasurable way of celebrating my birthday instead of being with my family and rejoicing than speaking to all of you here tonight. And so this is my fate in life. This is the story. I will start off by telling you a little bit about my background. It's one of my favorite subjects, and give you a little bit about how I came to this whole issue of creating the concept of religious peace. And what we're doing with it today. I was born, as Rav Hanan says, I was born in Denmark and grew up. Denmark had a special history, and my family had lived there for more than 3 centuries. And I would say I've mentioned maybe 2 episodes in the family's history which are important. One, my family a couple of 100 years ago adopted a writer which is probably the most known writer from Denmark, which you know of, a young writer called Hans Christian Andersen. And that's one of the reasons why I believe in fairy tales. Because of this special relationship where he was adopted by my family in Copenhagen when he came as a young and very poor student. And the second story is the story of the rescue of the Danish Jews during the Second World War, which I also hope that most of you have heard about, which was a unique story in the story of the Holocaust, where there were individuals who saved Jews, but when it came to the Danish people, it was the only place where a whole collective saved the Jews. And not least, also the Christian population in Denmark, which was very important in saving the Jews. Amongst them, my father's family were saved, both my father and mother's family, but my father's family was saved in the beginning by a priest and later by a bishop. We grew in grades, and until they were brought safely to Sweden, which was neutral during the war. So parts of this I learned from my mother's milk and my father's stories, that I could, that you have a choice. You have a choice where you can choose between good and evil. You have a choice of changing. My grandfather, who had functioned as a rabbi in Germany until the Nazis came to power in 1933, and then came back home to Denmark and spoke to non-Jewish audiences during all that time, and spoke about what was Nazism, what is Judaism, what is tolerance, what does it mean? And this was part of creating the kind of society which then saved the Jews in 1943 in those decisive days. This is part of my background, what I grew up with. I came to Israel to study in yeshiva. I studied in the old city, in Yeshivat HaKotel, and already in the beginning of my studies in 1974, we created a group of religious young people called Oz V'Shalom at the time, which supported creating peace with the Palestinians. And it was before there was anything called Peace Now, and this was an idealistic group. I was one of the younger of the group. There were those who started the group, Professor Aviv Ravitsky, I don't know if the name says anything to you, but Professor Uel Simon, who started the group. And for me, it was a natural thing to be part of this. But the idea was that we as religious people should support a peace. Not that we should stand in the front of the peace, but we should support a peace. And this was part of my background. I then, after I finished my rabbinical exams and got smicha from all the different parts of Orthodox Judaism here, the ultra-Orthodox Judaism, the Orthodox Judaism, I then went to Norway, which had been a country where Judaism had been totally destroyed during the Holocaust. And we revived the Jewish community together in Norway. And one of the first things I did was to try to reach out, of course, to the Christian community, which was obvious, was the big majority community, but also to the Muslim community, which at that time was very young, very new, and was very afraid of the outreaches from the Jewish community at the time. But after some years of effort, we started to cooperate there, and we created a unique cooperation, which became a kind of model for the rest of Europe, and a very interesting model. And I won't tell you all the story around it, but we had a common goal. We did something together. And this is something which I think has become very important in everything I've done for religious peace. More than dialogue, more than talking together. It's important to have dialogue and to talk together around the table. Who are we? Who are you? Who are this? And study text together and so on. It's all fine. But often when you do something together, when you have a common action, we had at that time an action together. It's not important what exactly it was. We ended up, we lost many times, but in the end we won. It's also not so important. But we became friends. and we got confidence. We came to know each other. We came in each other's homes, and we a confidence grew, and we together, actually, interestingly enough, also together with the atheists, they're not called, they're atheists, they're called human ethics, the humanistic ethics of, well, but they're really in many ways anti-religious. But we also they were also parts of our coalition that time. But that was less important for me because we always got along. But to get along in that way, we built such a trust. Just to give you one example, in the end of this relationship, this was already many years later, there was an Iranian delegation who visited Norway. It was already in 1999, when I already at that time, it was on my way into the Knesset and into the Israeli cabinet. And I was beginning to plan a life of commuting between Jerusalem and Oslo. And this Iranian delegation was coming to Norway, and there was a decision to execute 2 Jews for espionage in Tehran. And I wanted to appeal, as the head of the Jewish community of Norway, I wanted to appeal to the Iranians that they should not do this terrible thing against these 2 Jews. And asked for a meeting with the Iranian delegation, which of course they wouldn't do. And the Muslims read about this in the newspaper, and they wrote to me in Jerusalem. The entire Muslim community of Norway, which at that time already had grown to become a big and strong community, much, much bigger than the Jewish community. And they asked me if I would be willing to come to Oslo and be part of the Muslim delegation, which was meeting with the Iranians. And then to say what I wanted. And I said, of course, I would be honored. And I came, and I was part of the Muslim delegation, and I said what I had to say. The Muslims went aside, and I then said what I had to say. And the Jews actually were not executed. I don't know if it was because of my appeal and what was as a result of this, but in any case, I don't want even to take credit for that, but I want to take credit for the kind of trust which we built. With this, I came back to Jerusalem, and when I moved back to Jerusalem already in '86 and was commuting, I wanted to try to build a kind of concept where religion should be on the forefront of peacemaking, and not just, again, for dialogue, for the purpose of dialogue, which is all very nice. We can dialogue on the way, but active peacemaking. And I tried to see if there were partners. And '86 was already very early, very difficult. Came easier after '88, after the PLO had changed its attitudes towards Israel in the decisions they made in the PLO Convention 1988. And then already things started to open. And I started already before '88, but for sure after '88, with my first meetings with very leading Palestinian religious figures, and figures which were both political and religious figures. And that was when I started to actively work for religious peace. But at the same time, I was also involved in what was going on in the, say, secular peace track, which I was following very strongly. I don't want to give you the whole story of what happened and what didn't happen. Those of you who have followed what's gone on in the Middle East over the last 30 years know well. I think I know maybe a little more because I've been involved in everything which has gone on from the beginning of the Oslo process, and every single detail I know as on the palm of my hand, every single negotiation detail from the inside. But I do want to give you the bottom line of this. I supported Oslo, I supported Camp David, I supported the roadmaps, I supported Annapolis, and I would do it all over again. But I said from the first day, and I have interviews which I gave in '93 when Oslo came out to the world and so on. I said Oslo is lacking a major component because Oslo is a peace between the secular left of the Israeli society and the, I would say, what is seen as part of the Palestinian society, the Fatah part, which is by many seen as the secular, it's not totally correct, but the secular left of the Palestinian society. Now, at that time, the secular left was much bigger and much stronger, but it wasn't sufficient to make peace because it did not include in the tent of peace, although all those who did not feel as part of the traditional and very religious part of the two societies. And therefore, they felt excluded. Partly there were people, not necessarily all the leaders, but some of the leaders for sure, and I can prove this. I have a full lecture of 4 or 5 hours with lots of proofs and footnotes and everything. If you want to hear, I can give you examples of this. There were those who wanted the peace process also part of the secularization process of Israel and Palestine. They deliberately wanted that. And on both sides, not necessarily symmetrically and parallelly, but we had very strong forces. Now, it's legitimate. It's legitimate to want a secularization of society, a total cut between state and religion in every way and sense, in all public sphere of Israel and Palestine. It's a legitimate wish. But the moment you tie that wish together with the battle for peace, you're going to miserably fail. And that's what happened. You miserably failed because the traditional religious community did not then only have a problem with religious issues which are connected in giving up land, which are in itself issues, which both are issues for Islam and Judaism, but they had a problem with life itself, with existence itself. They then saw peace as a threat to life itself, to existence of Judaism here. They saw the peace as uproots, to talk about the roots here. We're in the very kind guests of roots. This was an uprooting of everything which was your identity, your belonging to this place. And therefore, you fought against it with everything you had, because it was not only uprooting from certain places of land, but it was uprooting of Judaism or of Islam. It was taking a cheap Western secularization and bringing that into the traditional communities here to destroy them. This was how peace was then seen. And therefore, peace could not succeed. And therefore, peace created such an opposition. And therefore, we saw the opposition in many different ways. We saw it with the terror. We saw it by the murders on the Jewish side with Baruch Goldstein and also which then brought again a whole series of terror acts. We saw it by the assassination of our prime minister, with the delegitimization, the total delegitimization, which was also created by American Jews including with liberal American Jews, people like Rabbi Avi Weiss, and people like many others, in the radical American Jews, the liberal American Jews, everybody was against the peace. Many people who went to radical steps and talked about and said you were allowed to break all the rules of Judaism in order to stop Rabin. And these expressions were used, and it could not lead to anything good in any way and sense. You saw it in yes, there'll be questions afterwards. There'll be time for lots of questions. Don't worry. So this was what happened. And this is what has happened again and again and again. Because all the peace process which has happened since Oslo have never learned the lecture from this. We've gone down the same path again and again. We did it in Camp David in year 2000. We did it in all the same, it was the same, going down the same blind, driving the same blind alley again and again, until the last time we did it with John Kerry and Tzipi Livni and Avikat, and we did the same thing again. Only this last time we did it, we drove down the blind alley on 4 flat tires. It's not, you don't get anywhere. Now, does that mean that the goal is not achievable? For many people, that was what happened. What people got that conclusion, that it means that we can't reach peace. That the idea of 2 states for the 2 peoples here is an impossible idea. It can't be reached. And because nobody saw how we can go a different path and get to the goal in the right way. And nobody thought out of that box. Nobody tried to do that. So now, if you go out, so this is the situation we have today. If you go out and ask the Israelis and Palestinians and Americans and all the people all around the world, you will find the vast majority support the solution, the same solution which has been on the table all the time. But they don't have a clue. They don't believe that it's possible to get there. Even now, you have the Biden administration, but they don't think that it's possible to talk about peace. So they will take some steps here, but nobody thinks that it's possible to reach peace. So they'll do maybe some other steps in order to avoid the catastrophe. But they won't take active steps towards peace. And if you ask the people here, the people believe that it's possible to obtain peace is probably within a statistical marginal mistake. You can count them inside that. So what are we going to do about that? This is what I want to share with you, my main point. This is where the religious peace comes in. This is how we broaden the tent, and we now bring inside the tent all those who were skeptical, who were against. The more, the merrier. The more, the better. And the more radical, the better. And for this purpose, I started working, as I said, already in the late 80s, and then I stopped for a period around Oslo because everybody said, let's just finish Oslo and we'll have a peace, and then we'll work on all of this afterwards. But then I saw it was going the way I expected, and it wasn't going anywhere. And then I put new speed on it. I created the organization which I'm leading for religious peace in the Middle East, called Mosaica. And I saw that it's possible, but I wanted first to create and to see maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just not possible. That's what everybody tells me, right? That's what the Israeli left says, because the Israeli left says that with Islam you can never make peace, because Islam has a doctrine, has dogmas, and will never give up the concept of Dar al-Islam, of that this whole land belongs to the Waqf, and you can't compromise on the land. And on the Jewish side the same way. So therefore you have to make peace only with a group of secular Fatah people. That is what the Israeli left has been preaching now for 25 years. And the Israeli right has been saying, well, you're right, but there is no Palestinian left, secular left. So really there's a consensus between the Israeli right and the Israeli left. There's a consensus between Bar Ilan and the Truman Institute, the Hebrew University and Tel Aviv University. Everybody agrees that this is impossible. So if everybody agrees that it's impossible, you go out and ask people on the street, do you want peace? They say, yes, of course we want peace, but there's nobody to make peace with. There's no partner to make peace with. The problem is, and I'm sure Rav Hanan will tell you the same. If you go out and ask the Palestinians the same question, they'll say, yes, we want to make peace, but there's no partner on the Jewish side to make peace with. And both sides will have very good arguments to prove their points. Again, I could go on and on and on and prove the points, but I don't have time to do that. So, I wanted to see. First of all, I wanted to learn. I know about Judaism a little bit. I wanted to learn, is it possible to make peace with Islam? And finally, I came to a major partner. I found a partner with whom I felt this is the one I want to create the religious peace together with. His name is unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. His name was Sheikh Abdallah Nimr Darwish. His history is very important. He was what we would call a terrorist. He created the Islamic movement. He created also the jihad. And he founded everything important here in Israel, Palestine, around Islam. He was imprisoned for that, and rightly so. And while he was imprisoned, he went deeper into Islam. And going deeper into Islam, he found that this was not the right way. And when he came out of prison, was released in one of the big prisoner releases, he came out and said, this is not the way of Islam. And since then, he supported the two-state solution. He supported 2 states for 2 peoples, which he very clearly talked about, the Jewish people, Palestinian people. And he found me, I found him. He was first considered as a traitor amongst all his former students and followers and so on. But slowly through the years, he became more and more accepted, more and more a leader of everybody. And until his funeral, which was followed by tens of thousands and millions followed on screen. Well, I spoke at his funeral as a rabbi, as an Orthodox rabbi, still as a staunch Zionist, the former cabinet minister, spoke at the funeral of the head of the founder of the Islamic movement of Islamic Jihad. But amongst those who spoke were the present heads of the Islamic Jihad and the Hamas and the Islamic movements, and also the moderates all over the Arab world who spoke on loudspeakers. And they all said, you, Sheikh Abdallah, have been right the whole time. You were just before your time. You were right and we were wrong. It was an incredible change which has happened. And this is the fantastic story about religious peace. The change which has happened in the Muslim world over these years, I think not least parts of our work, which is an unbelievable turnaround, which isn't true. It wasn't true 20, 25, 30 years ago. But today we have in the religious peace, we have leaders from all branches of Islam all over the Muslim world, from the most moderate branches to those who are considered most extreme. And they all support the concept of religious peace, which is that if peace is led by religion, by religious ideas, then they will be parts of this peace, which includes a political peace. Not that we should take over instead of the politicians. The politicians have to do their part, but we will lead the way. We will take away the stumbling blocks. And we have an amazing coalition today. We have centers today in Israel and all over the Palestinian territory. We have sister centers in Gaza, in Ramallah, and we have partnerships in all the big Palestinian cities, in Shechem, in Nablus, in Jenin, in Hebron, in all the Palestinian cities, and all over the Arab world. There's nothing which is happening today in the Middle East which we're not involved strongly in. No agreement, no exchange, nothing which we're not strongly involved in, both on a religious and on a political level. Because we've built a trust together. And I think that I go back to what I started with in Norway, that we brought results. We solved conflicts. One of the bigger conflicts we solved was, there was, maybe you remember a couple of years ago, a big crisis on the Temple Mount, when there were cameras, there was a terrorist act, and some policemen were murdered in a terrorist act. And the government put up cameras and metal detectors, and the Muslims wouldn't pray there. And this was a major crisis which all governments were involved in: the American government, the Arab government, the Saudi government, the Jordanian government, the Egyptian government. And negotiators tried, and everybody failed. And the Muslims wouldn't pray there. They were praying, hundreds of thousands of Muslims all over Jerusalem. And this was about to start a new intifada. And I was called by the head of the Jerusalem police, and he told me, if until Friday this is not solved, we will have thousands and thousands of people killed in the streets of Jerusalem. And it will spread all over the world because it's based all on Al-Aqsa. Jews are praying there, not one Muslim is there. And we had 3-4 days to solve this. And we brought in all the coalition partners, and everybody who had promised me in closed rooms that they would help making peace. I said, now you have to prove yourself. Can you really help us with a solution? And we came up with a compromise which was then accepted by the Israeli cabinet and by the Waqf, all 8 branches of the Waqf, with the help of people from all over the Muslim world. And we solved it in the last minute. There was a setback and then again, but it was solved. Nobody was killed. And then since then, we've solved crisis after crisis after crisis, including a big crisis today, which I'm still working on to finalize, which is saving human lives. But we can do much more than just solving crises. And we've been asked now to go in all over the world. You heard last week, Rav Hanan told me about Rav Moshe David, from Rav Moshe David. Some of you were on that call. This was also parts of an initiative which started from us. And we're now spreading that initiative to all of Europe. This is the same idea, how Jews and Muslims can cooperate and solve issues together. And we want now to do this all over Europe. We want to have the Amanah project in 20 cities all over Europe. And we're working today with our neighboring countries. I can't mention which ones, but ones who we're not talking about at all having relationships with. We're working in all those countries, and they're asking us to go in and solve issues, to help them working out things together from the concept of religious peace. And of course, our ultimate goal is to have a peace between Israel and Palestine. That is the ultimate goal here, and so that we can put this conflict behind us and work together in the future here in this area. But we still have a way to go, but it's inspiring to hear how, of course, we learn also from other places. I had a call 2 days ago from Rwanda, where they want to copy our model in Rwanda. They've also been through a terrible genocide in Rwanda, and they want to copy our model. And we have from Nigeria and many other countries who are using our model today. And this gives me encouragement that we're doing something right. So I promised that this would be just a short introduction, and I'm sure that you have a million questions, so I'll try then to go into more details by answering questions. And I thank you for still being on, still listening. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. That was pretty fascinating. That was quite fascinating. Although we are, I assume, all hungry to hear more details. So let's see questions.
You only gave me so short time, so that's what I can do.
So people who I see in the chat, there's a question. I will read the question to Rabbi Melchior. Others can put their questions in the chat. If you want to say your question orally, you can write in the chat that you want to speak orally, and that will put you in line to have your question asked.
I'll be pleased also to hear other voices than myself. I don't like, yes.
Okay, so someone who wants to again say their question, I'll give them a chance. So I'm looking now in the chat. Ruth, have you worked out what would be the status of Jerusalem under a peace agreement that you envision?
Well, first of all, we don't dictate a solution. I can say what my personal vision is, and I know it's shared by many of the leaders. We have today, I have to share with you, I didn't even mention that. We have today, we have, of course, a leading board, a steering committee and boards, and then we have lots of activists. And not everybody is on board with the full package of solutions. One of the things which we do in Mosaica, which we deal with, is also mediation. And we have the mediation center of all of Israel as part of our organization. We have 46 mediation centers all over the country. And parts of the mediation centers are also taking radical rabbis, difficult rabbis. We don't deal with people like Rav Hanan. He can't be a member with us at all. We're dealing with difficult people. So we have people who come from the difficult yeshivot, and what's in Israel called yeshivot hakav, those who have been really fighting against in many ways, against the peace in every way and sense, and those who are in the Garinim Toranim, who often have conflicts with religious leaders in the different cities. So we use the mediation centers we have to bring them, first of all, to solve local problems, and then to and then bring them slowly into the religious peace idea and concept, and then to be involved in solving the larger problems of the conflict and meeting. They feel already trust with each other, and then they're already parts of the process. So when I tell you what I believe should be the solution in Jerusalem, it's my belief, and together with me is some of the leaders of the religious peace track, but it doesn't necessarily represent the hundreds of thousands already today of people who are involved with us. My belief is that there will be no solution without a solution for Jerusalem. That Jerusalem cannot be a divided city again. Jerusalem needs to stay one city. But without the Palestinians feeling that they have a capital also in Jerusalem, Jerusalem is not going to be solved. It's not going to, it has to be a capital both for Israel and for Palestine, but as one city, as one undivided city. The problem of Jerusalem comes then down to the old city. What do we do with the old city? And my personal belief, and this I agreed with, I had one meeting with Sheikh Abdallah before we started the whole religion. I said to him, let's sit down and see if we can put a practical political solution to all the outstanding issues. And we sat down for half an hour and we finished all the political issues. That was it. It took us no longer than half an hour. It was really easy. And when it came to the old city, what we said was that nobody wants to give up sovereignty. Although sovereignty is not a religious concept. We have to understand that. It's not a religious concept. But we will never give up, as a Jewish people, not give up sovereignty in the old city. But the Palestinians are not going to give up sovereignty either. So we have to have a shared sovereignty in the old city. And we have to have the religions, it's a religious issue. We have to have the religions running. The three monotheistic religions, we have to have a shared sovereignty, and we have to have the three monotheistic religions under the present status quo, which nobody likes, but everybody can live with, until the Messiah comes. When the Messiah comes, in any case, everything, Sheikh Abdallah said, listen, if Messiah comes like you believe, then Sheikh Abdallah, who was a person who was also heavily handicapped, he said, I will come and carry the stones to build the Beit Mikdash, to build the temple. I will carry the stones for you. If it happens, because I believe in truth. If that's the truth, then I will be part of that truth. I have no problem with that. But until the Messiah comes, let's keep the status quo as it is. And any change in the status quo needs an agreement. And because we're so good friends, if there are necessary changes in the status quo, we have confidence enough in each other that we can make those changes together in agreement. And there are necessary changes which should be made, but they will be agreed upon. So we can run this together because we become friends. And that friendship is the key to everything. Part of the reason why people are joining the religious peace movement is that they see the friendship we have with the leader now who's taken over from Sheikh Abdallah, who's called Sheikh Av Beit Din. When we go out and we meet new leaders the whole time, they see our friend, they see how we trust each other. We put our lives in each other's hands. We really risk our lives very often, all kinds of situations I can't now explain. But when they see that we don't need to continue sentences from each other. They can hardly recognize one from the other. We know each other's sources in and out. This is the kind of solution for Jerusalem which we're talking about.
Thank you. The next question is from Roberta. Roberta, would you like to?
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much, Rabbi Melchior. I feel just inspired and thrilled to hear about your movement and everything that you're sharing, everything. And two questions that came up for me right away that I would really be grateful for you to address is, One, you talked about how the approaches to peace have really alienated the religious worlds. And I'm just wondering, what is your understanding then of why so many so-called secular Jewish Israelis have also gotten alienated from the peace movements? Because it's not just the religious world, it's, you know, people who, right, Israeli Jews who aren't religious and who are actually quite upset with so much of what the religious communities are doing, but they're not moving against the occupation either. So that's, I just would love to hear your insights about that. And then the other question, which comes from my direct involvement training Jewish Israelis and Jewish Americans in nonviolent communication, is how do we as Jews address the racism that is in us from our ancestral trauma, wherever it is from? But we see this in the US so clearly now. If we don't go deep into looking at how we, those of us who are white-bodied, let's say Ashkenazim, like me, you know, if we don't look at our own racism as Americans toward Blacks, as Israelis toward Palestinians and Arabs, we're not going to go where you want us to go. So if you could talk about those two huge questions, I would really appreciate it.
Well, those were big. The first question I don't think is so difficult. I think one of the reasons why people alienated from peace is because they see that the peace didn't go anywhere. So when you see, you have it, we had bad leaders, okay? The bad leaders are not only Bibi Netanyahu. We also had a leader who, I have to confess my sins, I was a part of that coalition with, we had a prime minister called Ehud Barak, who I personally believe is the worst prime minister we've had. He was the one who, after Camp David, said that we've proven now that there's no partner for peace, and this became, Ehud Barak didn't say that as a religious person. Of course, the Palestinians also have a big part of the blame for that. I don't say the blame is not, the Palestinian leadership have a part of the blame for it, and our leadership have, there's plenty of blame to go around. Okay, and it doesn't really matter also who's more to be blamed. I can win any discussion with anybody of who is more to be blamed, okay? But it's really, it doesn't bring us anywhere. What point is it? So I can say that we are 70% right and they're only 30% right. So what? Where does that bring us? We have today a situation that between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River, we have today about 50% of the population are Palestinian Arabs, and about, including those living in the State of Israel, and we have about 50% are Israeli Jews. That's the situation we have. Now, I live in a small shtetl, a small Jewish village called Jerusalem, and we, in this small city, we have about 40% of our population are Palestinian Arabs, Muslims. And there's some Christians also, but the vast majority are Palestinian Muslims. Now, where are we going? So let's say that they're to be for, where are we going with this? What's our future if we don't have peace? Are they all our enemies? Are they all terrorists, potential terrorists? Where's it going to bring us? One of the favorite expressions I have, a person who was actually one of the leaders of the Hamas. He was the minister of justice in the last Hamas government, His name is Dr. Ali Sirtawi. He's a giant thinker. He's the one who teaches, he's in Nablus, he teaches in Najaf. He's been teaching now for the last 20 years, all the new generations of Muslim thinkers. He's the one who's responsible for the curriculum of the biggest program for Muslim scholars. He said the following publicly. He said, listen, to his fellow Hamas leaders, he said, let's say that to those who want to continue with terrorism, he says, let's say that we succeed. Let's say we can kill 100 Jews. No, let's say we succeed even more. We can kill 1,000 Israeli Jews. No, he says. Let's say that we get the best rockets we can have, and we can really do a fantastic job. We can kill 100,000 Israeli Jews. What will we have done? What will we have created? We'll just have created a lot of sorrow, a lot of agony, a lot of pain, a lot of willingness to vengeance, and new spirals of hatred and killing and more killing, and bringing only tragedy, not only of the Israeli Jews, but of the Palestinians also, much more. What have we obtained? What good, what happiness have we brought? What future have we brought to our people? He said, speaking to the other Hamas leaders. And everybody was quietened by this. I think that these expressions show me, he's a partner, of course, in our coalition, and it shows me how the thinking has so much changed. And these leaders, I feel a trust with that this is how the Muslim world is changed. The leaders, the thinkers, those who have an influence over the big masses of people, those who are preaching in the mosques and in the schools and influencing the young generation. It really makes a difference. Now, I don't have a clue what it was you asked me about. I've luckily forgotten about that. What was it?
Well, Hanan, would you prefer opening it up to another question, or should I?
Thank you for that offer. Let's go to the next question, which was Yitzhak Sokolov. Yitzhak, you can open up your mic.
I believe I'm open. Am I?
Yes.
You are. We can hear.
Right. Good. First of all, I'll say it's good to see you. We have crossed paths in the Oz V'Shalom, in Netivot Shalom, in Memad, and in a few other places along the way. So in a sense, my question is more personal than anything. I think what you're doing is amazing. I just got off the phone yesterday with people. We're working on a conference in Abu Dhabi on tolerance, and in starting it with looking at Islam and Judaism as sources for tolerance. And I'll talk to you about that perhaps at another opportunity, because it sounds something that you would be happy to be involved in. And the last year I've spent during the Corona pretty much holed up at home studying Arabic so that I could participate in the kind of projects that you're doing right now. So that's very exciting for me. My question really is for someone like myself who with this kind of background. Nevertheless, when I look at the, I also spent a good number of years looking at things from the security perspective, working in things in that direction, and also trying to understand how this works. And one of the conclusions I reached, both politically and strategically, is that when you say that most Israelis agree to the idea of a two-state solution, I would say I agree with you when it comes to the desire to be a Jewish and democratic state, but it's limited in the sense of only if that state is defensible. And for many years, the assumption that a Jewish and democratic state requires a two-state solution based on the 1949, on the Green Line, fundamentally, as the point of departure, has meant that for people like myself who think strategically and think that, for instance, holding on to the Jordan River Valley is very important, or other places, then those I mean, one of the things that we see in Israeli polls, which people think is very strange, is that most Israelis are in favor of the two-state solution, and most Israelis want to annex the Jordan River Valley. And I don't think that's at all strange, because there is an issue here of how do we remain defendable and safe and legit and not accept the principle of the 67 line. So I guess my question is it possible to have a conversation within the frameworks that you're talking about that doesn't begin with the political assumptions of Oslo or of the 80s and 90s that are based on, or as you said, Annapolis, and that this, or even, you know, that require an Israeli withdrawal to lines that, to my estimation, most Israelis won't agree to?
Well, it's of course a good question. One of the problems with your question is that most people here in this country, probably also in America, most people want everything, okay? Now, if you go out and ask people, and we have political parties like that, most people want a wonderful social system with the best public education, the best health, public health system, and the best social services, and we don't want to pay taxes, okay? Now, this is what people want in this country. You go out, all polls show that. All polls show that. And we have political parties who have that as their party program, okay? Lots of them. Now, the problem is nobody wants to tell the truth. You can't do that, okay? You just can't do that. Now, the same is with the peace. Everybody wants to make peace. Everybody wants to have peace. Everybody thinks that that's the right thing to do. And nobody thinks that the peace also involves doing some justice also to the Palestinian people. Why should we do that when we can hold on to all the settlements and all the settlement blocks, and not only 3, 4 blocks or 5 blocks or 6 blocks, but 22 blocks, and when we can put, and we can have all of the Jordan Valley, and we can have this, and we can have the Trump plan, which is more or less more or less the Bibi plan, and even the small, you know, it was like a hot dog, right? When you can put the Palestinian state in this in the middle, and not even call it a Palestinian state, but you can call it some kind of autonomy, where every time they walk outside the line a little, and they're walking into, on all sides, into it, we can have everything. And then they can have their small, their 2, 3 small Bantustans like in South Africa, and we have everything. Why? And then they can take care of all their troubles and everything else, and we don't have to any responsibility for that. It's wonderful. Why not? But I doubt if you find one Palestinian who will agree to that. Of course, it's wonderful. Why not do that?
My question is different. In your framework, are you saying that in order to be involved in this, you have to agree to the principle?
No, I don't say.
Of 67
I don't say
plus.
a priori that you have to agree to anything. I say we welcome. We have people also involved in our leadership who believe in a one-state solution. Now, I personally believe that there is no such thing. It's an absurdum. It's a kind of fantasy which gives up on the whole concept of a Jewish state. There is no such thing. And put on the wall of those people, even amongst our leaders of put against the wall they will in the end say, well, of course, we can't really give the Palestinians full civil rights in that one state, because then that's the end of the concept of a Jewish state. And 99% of the Israelis will not want to give up, of the Jewish Israelis, will not want to give up the concept of having a Jewish state. So we have to find, we can't hold on to everything. But what is the difference, and how do we deal, and why do so many security experts, including former heads of Mossad and Shabak and so on, why do they support the religious peace so strongly, very strongly? And I'm involved very much with security experts because of several reasons. Number one, we've proven that we're much more efficient in lowering the terror, and because the religious leaders are all against violence, all of them, consistently against any form of violence. That's number one. Number two, the kind of solution where all of the Palestinian fractions are part of this peace, then all the security, why do we need so many security measures? We need it because we're only making peace with a small part of the Palestinians. But the moment the Hamas and all the different parts of the Palestinians are part of the peace, which is what we're dealing with. We already have a great part of the Hamas who are involved and who accept the principles of this peace. And many others who, even people from the Islamic Jihad and so on. If all the parts of Palestine are involved in this, then the security dangers are much less. Now, part of the Oslo concept was, for example, that you need to take away all the settlements. I was also for that, but today I'm not for that. Today I believe that we can keep those settlements who want to stay as part of Palestine, because it's not the same kind of security threat when you have all the Palestinian fractions who, by the way, we're talking about this. We have them inside the peace. So the kind of security threat you don't have. But if you believe that anybody is going to accept on the other side that all of the Jordanian Valley not only is going to be a security border, but is going to be annexed by Israel in a future peace, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Thank you. Eva, I wanted to ask something. Would you like to open your mic, Eva, and speak? Eva Hutt?
Yes, hi, sorry. I'd like to hear specifics about what you think the process should look like going forward. And I want to express a concern about if religious on both sides are going to be in charge, how are you going to be sure that women have full rights in either society?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm happy that you asked the question. By the way, you can follow up, Yitzhak, with another question if you want. I saw that you were not fully satisfied. You're welcome to follow up.
I'll be happy to find you another opportunity.
Okay, but let me answer your question.
And I think I need to let other people speak in this forum, but if we could get together privately, I'd be happy to.
Okay, well, you're always welcome to ask me anything. Let me answer your questions. First of all, when it comes to going forward, what we want to do, first of all, now we want to prove more and more, not only that we can save thousands of lives and solve conflicts and have more and more people joining the religious peace, but that we can actually move the process ahead. And we want to do it more publicly. We're now doing some big websites now, which are going up. And I hope that there will be some dramatic developments, which we will be responsible for, which also will be more public. Up till now, we've preferred to work under the radar. everybody says we're the best kept secret. And I'm just fine. When I was in politics, I had to be in the newspaper every day. Now I'm happy every day I'm not in the newspaper. But there comes a stage when if we're not on the front page of the New York Times or whatever you read, then we haven't succeeded. So you will find us hopefully very soon on the front page of the New York Times with breakthroughs for peace. And what we want to do is to change, to make a switch, because you need to make a switch to make people believe that this revolution has happened, that there is such a big change. I mean, just take it. I'll give you one example, which maybe also Rabbi David Rosen spoke to you about. Just the fact that a big Saudi leader like Sheikh Mohammed Al-Isa, who is a close partner to us in the religious peace, that he goes to Auschwitz together with many, many other, as the head of the Muslim World League. He goes to Auschwitz, and after his visit to Auschwitz, writes that any Muslim leader who does not acknowledge what we learned from the Holocaust as parts of Islam, as part of his learning as a Muslim, he is denying Islam. That he writes that on the front page of every single Arab newspaper. Not only in an op-ed in the Washington Post, that's not a big deal, but every single Arab newspaper. And that he gets positive reactions back. Could not have happened some years ago. I remember when I was first interviewed in Saudi news reports, maybe 10 years ago, all the big Saudi television programs interviewed me. Again, as an Israeli, I only have an Israeli passport. And interviewed on all the news, and the Israeli journalists wouldn't believe that it was true. Okay, you don't believe it, you don't believe it, what can I do? But today, already people believe that these changes are happening. In the heart of Islam, in Mecca, right? And these changes are happening and they're filtering down and they're changing the views of people. And it's so crucial, so important. So these are changes which will happen and they will change then the views here. And now I come back also to what Roberta asked about, because I remember now what you asked me about. It was a very important question. The second question was how we deal with the racism in ourselves, amongst ourselves, because we often deal with the racism. We're always concerned with what the others are racists and anti-Semites, and we don't deal with our own racism. And I therefore, it's very, very important that we deal with our own racism. Now, racism is many kinds of racism. Racism against blacks, against people of other beliefs. It's against Arabs, and we need to deal with our own racism. We always talk about what is in the Palestinian school books. We don't talk about what are in our own school books. There was a big research in Tel Aviv University about which went through their school books and our school books. Ours did not come out any better than their school books, by the way. This research was what's it called? Put in Gniza, was not permitted published by the Israeli Ministry of Education. But it was a very serious research done, which was ordered, by the way, by the Joint Religious Council. So we need to educate our people. It's a hard work to educate because people are afraid of the other and this, and we know this is a long lecture of how you deal with racism and prejudice and xenophobia and we all need to deal with it. One of the things, by the way, we're doing in North America as part of Mosaica program is we're taking all the Orthodox rabbis, not the Reform and conservative rabbis. Who, by the way, we also need to deal with them. But we're starting with the difficult, we're working with the RCA, and we've brought the RCA for the first time to adopt the religious peace track. And we brought them to meet we've had the 60 leading rabbis. We'll have all the biggest communities of the RCA. We've brought them to Israel and to Palestine over the last 2 years, together with the Danny Abraham Center in Washington. And we brought them to meet with the leaders of both the secular but mostly the religious leaders. And this has been an immense success. And now we've made conversations, and we've been in Washington, and we've had seminars now together with them, and we've had them adopt the religious peace track. And this has been a very important, and this is how, just to give you an example, just before the corona, I went together with my leading Muslim partner. We went to visit the 5 biggest communities of RCA in New York. And I was Shabbat in a tremendously big community in Brooklyn. And I gave a Shabbaton, and on Shabbat for Musaf, in a community which is so right-wing, I can't tell you, okay? And I was giving a shiurim there the whole of Shabbat, and Motzei Shabbat. Afterwards, the sheikh came and we spoke together. But for Musaf on Shabbat, with, I don't know, 700-800 people there, the chazan there, he sang the Kedusha in the tune of Salam. Now, this was 700-800 people who probably, I would assume that at least 95% were voting Trump. And they were hearing about how we're going to make real peace in the Middle East through religion. And they were all singing Salam on the Kedusha of Musaf. I was crying of movement from that, in that moment. And it's something which you can turn around, the fear. They were standing ovation for the sheikh, who is the biggest religious decisor for it, the biggest posek in this whole area. He turned them around totally. It's not the same when they hear it from him, they hear it from me. It's a different story. Now, so this is how you deal with the racism. You have them meet, you have them see, you have them hear, you have them feel. Now to answer your question about what will happen with the secular, what will happen with the women. First of all, I'm talking about expanding the peace tent. I'm not talking about that the secular should not be a part of this peace tent. I want to expand. I want to include more in the peace tent. All those who were not welcomed inside the peace tent. That's the first thing. The secular have to be in the peace tent. I don't want to chase anybody about. I believe in cooperation between secular and religious, between Reform and Orthodox. I dealt with it all my life. I'm the only Orthodox rabbi, I think, at least I was, who received an honorary doctorate from the Hebrew Union College. Okay, I have some credibility in this area, but I also work with all the ultra-Orthodox rabbis, and I work with all of everybody. Intimately, I work with all the right people who are far away from my opinions. But we want to open this. And when it comes to women, it's also a question, it's a very good and very important question, because the women are the ones who make peace in this world. And that's a fact. You can see here in the corona, which countries have succeeded in corona. It's only the countries which are led by women. One of them is the country where I'm the Chief Rabbi in Norway, and And another one is the country which I once was born in. I was always born there, but I once was a citizen of, which was Denmark. Look at their numbers, and look at New Zealand and many other countries where you have women leaders. They know how to deal with big crises and solve them. And I have women who are leading nearly all my ventures. They put me up as a figurehead, you know. I have to raise the funds, and sometimes they let me come in and so on, but they're the ones who are leading everything. We have a women's coalition in the religious peace track, and they're doing immensely important work. Just to give you, you know what, because you asked, I'll give you an example also of this. I had a discussion with the foreign minister of Sweden. She's a strong feminist. She's a different one now, but the one who was. And she was a very strong feminist, and I had a discussion with her, and she said to me, we can't support you because it's all men and it's all this. I said, listen, if I come to our coalition, I said that I'll say to them, the foreign minister of Sweden wants you to change the religious leaders. They have to be women now, and they're going to laugh me out. But let me tell you that because of our work together and because of our joint thinking, I'll tell you some of the changes which has happened in the Islamic movement. Okay? The Islamic movement here in Israel has, over the last 5 years, have made the decision why there were no women in the leadership of the Islamic movement, which is our main partner here. But because of the talks we've had, I'm not saying it's my job, it's my work, but because of the kind of talks we've had with the whole leadership, they now have a third of their leadership, at least. They have to have a third of their leadership have to be women. They now have one of their Knesset members, for the first time in the history, in the Haredi parties, you don't have one woman, but they now have a woman who is she's an Orthodox Haredi Islamic woman, and she's a fantastic member of Knesset. I hope she'll be in the next Knesset also. You never know after the elections what will be. But she's the first Islamic woman in the Knesset. This is a change they made in their laws as part of our working together. My friend, he made a fatwa that women can sit in the religious courts. She can be a judge in the religious courts. This fatwa was accepted by the Islamic movement, by the Fatah, and by the Hamas. And the law in Israel was changed so that women can now sit in as judges in the Sharia courts in Israel. And one of his students became the first woman to sit in Sharia courts in Israel. This is all a result of the religious peace movement. So not only has the religious peace movement not led to women being chased out of the tent, but it's led to women being brought more and more into the tent, and slowly from within things have changed, not because of the foreign minister of Sweden said so, but because of within our working together has had this effect and has really made a change on the ground. But you don't know about it because you don't follow this from within. And that's sad. But that's why Rav Hanan asked me to speak tonight, so that you could hear about it. I'm sure.
And we have at least 6 more questions. Let's see what we're going to do. We have Sheldon now that would like to ask a question. Sheldon, you want to open the mic and speak?
Well, you sort of answered the question I had, which is why I, as an American, am not reading more about you in the New York Times, to use your reference to a newspaper. So what has to happen before your work is more publicized so that people like myself have more hope for a peace that is durable and can move away from military solutions? What do you need to happen before something can go in the New York Times, to use your comment?
Well, first of all, we have to know also our own limitations, first of all. We can't do everything. That's first. I hope that things will happen, even maybe in the close future, in the near future, which will lead to this being in the front page of the New York Times. But you have to understand that what we're doing is against, I've sat with some of the biggest PR people in the world, right? And including some people who are involved in our work and love our work. And they've said, what you're doing, they know our work in and out. They say, what you're doing is so much against all conventional wisdom, what everybody's been told so long time, that people just won't believe it. Just don't. That's why I'm also not afraid often to talk about it publicly, because nobody believes it's true in any case. So I don't have any problem of the leaking out and things stuff. It's no problem. Nobody believes it. And it's so much against the common wisdom. I sat with a group, recently, I sat with a group of leading columnists and commentators on television and people who are professors here on the left. And we sat, that's already some time ago, but we sat with a group and we talked about what we can do to really get the peace process moving. And I said, maybe we should talk to people who are like soft Hamas. I mentioned some of the names. And they started laughing at me. Said, these people, they will never sit with any of us. They will never sit with you. Now, these are people already for 5, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, who not only have been sitting with me, we've been in each other's homes. We have solved issues, many, many issues. They've been writing about this publicly. And these big experts who are writing all these books, they don't have a clue. They just they don't know anything about this whole world, which is happening under their nose, and they don't have a clue. And they don't really want to know. They don't want to read, they don't want to hear. I've asked sometimes journalists, do you want to come and meet? Do you want to come and sit? No, we don't. It's not. We don't want to hear. So, but I hope that some things will happen. There have been some stories, okay? There have been stories in the newspapers, in several of the newspapers, but I hope that there will be things which will be so big that everybody will see. And one of the things which has happened here in the recent months, which have been sensational here, that people don't understand what's going on, is that the head of the Islamic Party has broken away from the other Arab parties in making agreements with the government. Nobody understands it. They don't know that he's been part of the religious peace movement for years. They just don't understand it. How can this be? Now everybody knows about this now because he's been very, very outspoken the whole time. And the other Arab parties, they don't like it. So this has been a big thing. So suddenly people have opened their eyes, but they still think that it's a game of some kind. They don't understand that this is the real thing. It's just come out in the open now.
We have a very big issue that Yoel wants to bring up. Yoel Oz.
Yes. Hi, Rabbi Melchior. I don't know if you remember me. We met when I was in Washington, D.C. We spent a Friday night in a hotel lobby talking about American Jewish politics. But my question for you is, what is your opinion of, instead of trying to divide the land, the idea of a federation or a confederation, and using religion? I wrote a book called Abrahamic Confederation. I'm writing a book now called Abrahamic Federation. What do you think of federation, confederation as possible political structural solutions? And what do you think about religion as a symbolic unifying factor?
Well, first of all, as I say here, I think that religion is a very unifying factor and very, not only symbolic, but much more than symbolic. I must confess that I don't really understand the whole confederation, federation. I don't, it's not something which is preoccupying me. I don't go into these models so much. If it's possible, it can bring a solution, then okay. I'm not against it, but it's not. I'll give you an example from where I come from. Okay, Sweden and Norway. Okay, these are two countries who they have the same religion. They have nearly the same language. They're the same kind of people, same nature. They were two independent countries, but they had a federation together. They had the same king from 1814 till 1905. The Norwegians couldn't take it. And they considered they didn't want to have a Swedish king. They wanted to be totally free. And they were willing to go to war and all be killed for that, because the Swedish were at that time much stronger than the Norwegians. They were willing to be killed for their freedom. They wanted a total freedom. And so much that the rabbi of the Norwegian Jewish community at the time in 1905, he declared at Shabbat Parshat Zachor before Purim that the Swedes are the Amalekites of our time. They're the absolute evil of this world. And the Swedes gave in, and the Norwegian got their own king, who they imported from Denmark, by the way, because they didn't have a king. They imported the king from Denmark. So they got, we've been in a conflict for 120 years. And I think there is something to the idea and concept of independence. Palestinians need some kind of freedom of independence.
But does that mean separation? That's my question.
It doesn't mean we can't totally separate, because we're so like this. Right? We have Arabs living in Israel, who many define themselves as Arab Palestinians, but they will live in Israel. They want to live in Israel. They want to be Israeli citizens. 95% of them. They don't want to be parts of Palestine, but they want there to be a Palestine next to Israel. And I think, as I said before also, that there will be Jews living in Palestine. Some will want to move into Israel.
You really believe that the people in Kiryat Arba are going to become Palestinian citizens?
If they want, I know that people, and I don't know if Kiryat Arba, but I know that people in Ofra and many other places, in Tkoa, or people in Tkoa want to be, yes. Rav Menachem Fuhrman, he always said he would want to become a Palestinian citizen. And I know many others who maybe they want, maybe they don't, maybe they'll be continued to be Israeli citizens. It's not so important. I think that we can find a solution for that. I think many will move inside the settlement blocks or inside Israel in a solution, in a political solution, and some will want to stay. Again, if it's a solution which includes 95% of the Israelis and Palestinians, then I think absolutely it's possible. But again, if it makes it easier to swallow by calling it a federation or confederation, and we that way can feel that it's all ours and they can feel it's all theirs, then fine with me. I'm not against that. I don't have anything against it. I just think that those who talk about a one state, that's a total non-starter. Just a total non-starter.
Between 1 and 2, I like to say there's 1.5.
Yeah, but that's okay.
We have no time left, but there are 3 more people that want to ask their questions. So let's try and fit that into no time. We have George, we have Richard, and we have Bilal. So first, George. George, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Am I unmuted here?
You're okay. We can hear you.
Yeah, yes, Rabbi, you've got unique experience in both movement building and government. What would you say to Palestinians that would like a greater voice in their own government, would like a path to leadership, would like greater political participation? And what do you think they should be doing?
I think that they should have a right to greater participation. I hope that they will have. Listen, it's very difficult now. We're talking about Palestinian elections now in a few months, but on the other hand, I doubt if it will happen. And even if there are elections, they're talking about having an agreement, having one list, which is where Fatah and Hamas and independents all go together on one list. They're in a very difficult situation now. It's totally non-functionable, what is now. But they need some kind of election to get out of the spot they are in now. And I hope that they have a greater democracy. They in that area they can learn from us, although our democracy is also now functioning on half engine just now. But still, they have still a lot to learn from us in that area. But I hope that they listen. After '93, they very much saw our democracy as their model for democracy, very much so. Now they know less about it because now they only see occupation and trouble. They know less about what's going on in Israel today than what they did. Then we had a much more mixed society before '93.
Richard, let's let you ask the question that you want to ask. Richard, are you with us?
Richard, you're on mute.
Richard Rosenfeld?
You're on.
Oh, I didn't know you were talking about that, Richard. Okay. Yes, I was. Yeah, I just had a question of whether what did I say? The state, whether a Jewish state precludes the idea of a separation between the religious aspects of the state and the secular aspects of the state. It does. I mean, I'm trying to find a way that you can have religion, but you can, for example, have a civil marriage, or that even that that people of different ethnicities can intermarry if they so choose?
Well, I think I very much believe in a Jewish state. I believe in a Jewish and democratic state. The letters of Meimad was Medina Yehudit, Medina Demokratit, the Jewish and democratic state. There's no reason whatsoever why you can't have a Jewish state and have civil marriages. I was totally against coercive religious legislation. I suggested civil marriages when I was in Knesset, against the whole of the Labour Party, by the way, which at that time was totally against civil marriages. There's no reason whatsoever why we shouldn't have civil marriages. It's not against being a Jewish state. I think we would be a much more Jewish state by having civil marriages. And I can explain it very much, but I would very much prefer that people married with chuppah and kiddushin, according to Jewish law, but that has to be their decision, not because the law says that they should do.
But in other aspects, I mean, the
one who founded Meimad, our party, Rav Yehuda Mital Zatzal, who created the biggest Hesder yeshiva in Israel, Yeshivat Har Etzion, he also supported civil marriages.
We're going to end with the question of Bilal Arar. Bilal, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm Palestinian secular, actually. I want to say that I'm very happy for your work. It gives a lot of hope. And I think what you said breaks a lot of prejudices about religious people. Even here we have some people secular who have prejudices about religious people. But I want to just give a small comment about what you talked about, which is the issue of identity and the system of governance, and the issue of modernity and also identity or religion. I think that this is not just here, it's all over the Middle East. And I think that the best way we can approach it is to think in a different way. For example, when we talk about secularism, we're not talking about that I should not a religious person. That secularism is a system of governance that brings all people together and allows all people to coexist with each other without. So, for example, I can be a secular Muslim or a secular Jewish, but the idea is that secularism is more of a system of governance rather than a religion or a system of belief or a system of values. And the other thing I want to suggest is that one of the main problems in a state or state building is that if there are a lot of factions, for example, let's say an Islamic party, Islamic political party, Jewish political party, and for Ashkenazi political parties, that it creates factionism among society, and that leads to failure in the long run. So my opinion is that, for example, the religious people, religious leaders can, for example, create a party that's called conservative party, for example. They make the major lines, for example, that they can derive from Islam and Christianity and Judaism, and there are a lot of shared points in all these religions, and they can join as a conservative party in a civil state. There's no need for, let's say, ideological factionism inside the one state, because that creates polarization, a lot of polarization, and it has failed in many states. And that's the idea of having a secular state. It's not against religion, it's more a system of governance so that people can coexist and create a functional state for everyone.
Well, you're taking up very, very big issues which deserve much more. People are starting to leave us now, which I very much understand after all this time. But I will just touch in on some of the things which you're talking about. You're using the word secular. The word secular means different things, okay? You're talking about a secular state. I agree with you. A secular state is a state which is not a theocracy. Okay, you're using it in that sense, and in that sense, you're right. I also use it in that sense. Okay, but secular also means something else. Secular also means something which is a person who is secular, who doesn't believe. That's something else. Okay? A person who doesn't believe, it's also used in that sense, the word secular. Okay? Now it's used interchanged with each other. So I believe that Israel is a secular state. Israel is not a theocracy, but secular, in the sense I've been using it here, I've been using it in the sense as opposed to believing. Okay, and I've used it in a different sense. Now, I don't believe that there is such a thing as secular Muslims. There's no such thing as secular Christians. There is such a thing as secular Jews. Okay, I don't think that there is no such thing. This is a big issue. I can go into this with you, but there is no such thing because Judaism is in its content. Judaism is it's a different kind of concept, because in Judaism you can have a cultural or national or so a connection, which in Islam you can't be a non-believing Muslim. That's an oxymoron, okay? But you can have. I had in my community in Norway, I had my chairman of my community. He was the chairman of the religious Orthodox Jewish community, and he said that he was a non-believer. You couldn't have that in a Muslim community. You could not have that, okay? Now that is because it's an oxymoron. So I think it's important to divide between the different expressions. And also when you go into the question of religious parties, there's a very big difference in what is the substance of religious parties. You can have a religious party like Meimad, where we had many seculars who were members of Meimad. Although we in basis were originally a religious party, but we had many secular members. We had many Arab members, Muslim members of Meimad. You have a party like the Ennahda party in Tunisia, okay, which I think is the most democratic party in the world. Okay, for me it's very much compatible to Meimad, to our party. It's a party which is against coercive religious legislation anyway in sense. Okay, but this is a big issue which I think is too complex to go into at this hour of the night, at least for us. For our Americans, it's getting earlier, but it's still early. But people are leaving us, and I think that we've already lost more than a third of our people here at this stage. And so therefore, I think that we will leave it with this, and we can continue the discussion another time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Melchior, very much. I think you left us hoping for more and looking forward to hearing whether New York Times or on new websites, what's going to be developing. It was put in the chat that there'll be a website, progressispossible.com, progressispossible.com, that will be going live very soon, which we can hear more about what's going on. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you again, Rabbi Melchior. Please, as I always say at the end, don't forget that Roots Shoshim Tudur, the Israeli-Palestinian Grassroots Initiative for Understanding Nonviolence and Transformation, is making these events available to you week after week. We have to pay the bills. We have to keep the coffers full in order to continue these events and do our events on the ground, bring together Israelis and Palestinians. So look at our website, friendsofroots.net. Like us on Facebook, and to the degree that you're able, please support us. Friendsofroots.net on the web, and Facebook, Friends of Roots. Hope to see you next week when we have Roots of the Jordan Valley, a discussion about the new branch of Roots in the Jordan Valley. Roots in the Jordan Valley. Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you next week.